Hello everyone, Jake here with Unreal RPG Mastery. In this video, we are going to implement a character death system. And the first thing we'll need is a basic value for health. So create a new variable, we'll make this a top float, we'll call this health. And the default value for health will be 100. We're only going to use this float variable temporarily to help us code the death state. But later in the course, we're going to create a stat system. Our stat system will handle the health for us. But for now, we can just use this float variable. And we can just create a simple event and call this event take damage. And this event will have an input of top float, and the input will be in damage. And so we're going to take the health, and we're going to subtract the health by the damage, and then set that as the health. However, we do need to clamp this value. And the reason why we need to clamp this value is because in our case the health will not need to go below 0, so we won't need a negative value for health. What you can do is just plug this into value, plug this into max, and have the min be 0. Then we can say, is health less than or equal to 0? If it is, then we need to create a new boolean. We'll call this one B is dead. Compile and save. And then we set B is dead to true. Okay, now let's create a ragdoll system so the character will ragdoll upon death. We're going to need a function to enable the ragdoll. So let's go ahead and create a new function to enable the ragdoll. Now the most simple and basic way to make the character ragdoll is to get the mesh, then you set collision profile name, and the in collision profile name will be ragdoll. And from there you get the mesh again, and you set all bodies below simulate physics. New simulate will need to be true, and for the inbo name we'll need to make literal name, and we can make this name pelvis, so that's the pelvis name. Actually, it would be better to set this to a variable, so you can just drag out from here and promote to variable. We can call this pelvis bone name. So that way you can easily adjust a variable if you ever need to use a character with a different pelvis bone name. Okay. And here we can set all bodies below physics blend weight. And this will just make things look a little bit better. So we can plug in the bone name, and we can set the physics blend weight to something like 1. Okay, and now to test this out, we can just add a tab input event. And here we can just enable ragdoll. And let's see how it looks. So the character does ragdoll, however, we can still move the capsule around. So let's go ahead and fix that. To fix that, we can just get the character movement. We can set movement mode to none. And now the character can no longer move. Another issue that we have is that the camera doesn't follow the mesh whenever the character is ragdolling. So as you can see, he falls down, but the camera stays up here. So what we can do to fix that is we can get the camera boom, and we can attach component to component, and the parent that we want to attach to is the mesh, and the socket name that we want to attach to is the pelvis bone name. For the location, rotation, and scale rule, we want that to be keep world. Let's turn the camera collision off so that way the camera isn't going crazy after the character dies. So we can set do collision test to false. Okay, now let's test it out and see how it works. That's much better. And something that we can do to make it look a little bit nicer is to add some physics pushback, so that way whenever the character ragdolls, they get pushed back a little bit, which will look a whole lot nicer than the character just ragdolling in place. So let's create a new function, and we'll call this one apply hit reaction physics velocity. Okay, and now we can get the mesh, and we can set physics linear velocity. We're also going to need an input. This will be of top float, and this will be initial speed. Okay, compile. And now let's get initial speed. Now we need to get actor forward vector. And from here we need to multiply that. And for the B vector here, we can right click on this, and we need to convert pin to float. Okay, now we need to drag out from the initial speed, and we need to multiply that by -1. Plug that in here. And the reason why we're multiplying this by -1 is so the character goes backwards. So plug that in here. And for the bone name, you can just plug in the pelvis bone name. Okay, now plug that in. And now we can go to the event graph, and after we call the ragdoll function, we can also call apply hit reaction physics velocity. We can have some example value here like 2000. Okay, let's see how it works. That looks a lot better. Okay, now something else we can do is make his weapon simulate physics. So let's go to the base weapon. Let's create a custom event. We'll call this one simulate weapon physics. We need to get item mesh. And for this one, we need to set collision profile name. And also we need to set simulate physics. Okay, now for the collision profile name, just go to edit, project settings. We can go look under collision. And you can see we have an option for physics actor. Okay, so we'll just set this one to physics actor. And after this, we can get main weapon, check if it is valid. If it is valid, if the weapon is valid, then we simulate weapon physics. And now what we can do is, instead of setting dead to true here, we can take this value and we can set dead to true here and create a custom event. We can call this one perform death. Now we can tab perform death just for testing purposes here. And also when the health goes to 0, here in our condition checks, we can add a couple pins. We need to check is disabled not. And is dead not. As you may have noticed, we're getting a lot of booleans here. Like we have is attacking, is top in combat, is dodging, is disabled, is dead. This is starting to get a little bit out of hand the more we add. We're getting a lot of booleans. A better way to do this would be with an enum, and that's actually something I will cover in a later part of the course. And I'm doing all of these with booleans on purpose, so that way I can teach you that you can do these things with booleans, and then later whenever we do things with enums, I can show you and help you to understand that there's a much better way. But we're going to do that in the more advanced combat section. In that section, we're going to build a state manager system. This state manager system will help us manage things like this. So now that we've done that, let's test it out. And that works just fine. We can't perform any actions. And something else that we can do is we can call take damage, and the end damage will be damage. And we can also do, for testing, instead of perform death, we can take damage. And just for testing, we can take 25 damage. So after we press this 4 times, the character should die. So let's see if that works. 1, 2, 3, 4. That works exactly as it's supposed to. And that's working well. The character dies after he takes enough damage. So now let's go ahead and test it by hitting the character. And after we hit the character so many times, the character dies. You may have noticed a bug. After you kill the character, you can still hit the character and blood spawns, even though the character is dead on the ground there. You may also notice an invisible collision here that's blocking your path. And the reason why this is happening is due to the capsule component. I'm not sure if this will show up in the video, but there's a capsule collision around the character. And this capsule collision is actually what you're colliding with and what you're hitting. So to fix that, what we need to do is go to Enable Ragdoll, move this out here so we can have some room, get the capsule component, and let's set collision response to channel. Plug that up here. The channel is going to be pawn, and the new response will be ignore. So let's test that out and see if it works. And that works just fine. You may also notice another issue where your camera is colliding with the capsule component. So what we need to do is we need to go to channel, camera, and set new response to ignore. And that seems to have fixed our issues. The camera no longer glitches when we walk past the character. Now you may notice another issue. And the issue that we have is that we can still attack the capsule component even though the character is ragdolled. So to fix that, we can create an interface function that checks if the character can be damaged or not. So let's go ahead and do that now. Combat system, blueprints, interfaces, and let's go to combat BPI. We'll call this one can receive damage. Create an output of top boolean. Okay, make sure the function is selected, and then we're going to call this output return value. Compile and save. Okay, now let's implement the interface. We need to get is dead, not boolean. Okay, now let's go to our combat system, blueprints, actors, base weapon. Let's go to where we're applying damage. Let's only apply damage if the hit actor can receive damage. Okay, now compile and save, and let's test it out. And that has resolved our issue. Another thing that we need to do is destroy the character upon death and destroy his weapon upon death, because we don't want to keep these actors in the world if we don't need them. So go to the death event right here. Let's add a sequence by holding S and left clicking. The sequence will execute a series of pins in order, so it'll perform 0, then 1, then 2, and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell the weapons to simulate physics first, and then after that we're going to wait some times. We're going to add a delay. I'm going to put that to about 4 seconds. Then after 4 seconds has passed, let's get the main weapon from the combat component, and we're going to destroy actor. And after the actor has been destroyed, we're going to destroy the character blueprint. Now, since this is a player character, you also would want to add some code before you destroy the actor to respawn the character. But we don't need to do that right now because we don't yet have an AI that can kill the player. So we will add that later. Okay, now let's test it out. And that works just fine. And one more important thing that we need to do is we only want to destroy this weapon if it is valid. Because if the player dies without a valid weapon equipped, then we will get a compile error when it tries to destroy a weapon that isn't valid. what we can do is just add is valid. And only destroy the main weapon actor if it is valid. That brings us to the end of this video. In this video, we've implemented a character death state, simple health stat, and our ragdoll system with physics knockback. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we are going to fix bugs and improve gameplay.